shortage of food is rising. Economies are falling as tension between Russia and Ukraine intensify. The world economy is estimated to lose $2.8 trillion, and this amount could rise if Europe experiences energy shortages this winter. The estimate by the Paris-based Club of Advanced Economies reveals the scope of the economic effects of Moscow's invasion of its neighbors 9 months ago, the largest military conflict in Europe since World War II, as well as Russia's aspirations to forcibly redraw Europe's political borders. Due to the Russian invasion, energy prices have increased drastically, which has reduced consumer spending and damaged corporate confidence, particularly in Europe. Supply chains have been disrupted. There are shortages of food and other necessities, and markets all across the world have been rattled by the war. Western nations worry that Russia's partial mobilization order and its plans to seize large portions of Ukraine would cause the conflict to linger for many months or even years, adding to the uncertainty already plaguing the world economy. And certainly, the cost of the conflict is high for us. The OECD predicted that the world economy will expand by 3% this year and 2.2% the following year. It had anticipated growth of 4.5% in 2022 and 3.2% in 2023 before the war. The discrepancy between those two figures indicates that the war and its after-effects will have cost the globe the same amount of money as the French economy as a whole produced in those 2 years in terms of economic output. The OECD predicts that in 2023, the Eurozone's GDP would only grow by 0.3%, while Germany's economy will decrease by 0.7%. The research organization anticipated growth of 1.6% in the Eurozone and 1.7% in Germany when it last issued projections in June. If natural gas prices increase by 50% for the rest of the year, European economic growth in 2023 may be 1.3 percentage points lower. If energy prices were to increase once more, the OECD warned, Europe's economy may experience an even more severe collapse. The European economy might grow by 1.3 percentage points less in 2023 if natural gas prices increase by 50% throughout the rest of the year, while the world economy would only expand by 1.7%. It would be a recession in Europe. Such a price increase may occur if Europe has energy shortages throughout the upcoming winter due to unusually cold weather. According to the OECD, energy consumption needs to decrease between 10 and 15% from current levels to lower that danger. It's critical to ensure the demand is decreased in addition to concentrating on supplies. Several billions of euros have been spent by governments across Europe to help people and businesses deal with the rise in energy prices. Energy price caps have been one form of this assistance. However, those ceilings make households less motivated to reduce consumption. Although price caps are expensive and alter price signals, they may be desirable in the short term. However, greater prices result in lower consumption if you want to save energy. Government borrowing costs have increased as a result of the expense of supporting citizens and enterprises, which may further restrain economic growth. The OECD recommended that aid be directed at the most vulnerable households to prevent further significant increases in debt. It estimates that through December of this year, the 35 countries whose policies it monitors have committed to spending around $150 billion on general price control measures, as opposed to about $15 billion on more focused price control initiatives. The OECD reduced its prediction for US economic growth in 2023 from 1.2 to 0.5%, but warned that if inflation doesn't decline as quickly as the Federal Reserve anticipates, the slowdown may be even greater. According to the organization, China's economy would experience a moderate recovery in 2023 after experiencing sluggish development in 2022 as a result of lockdowns to combat the COVID-19 pandemic. The OECD had predicted growth of 4.4% in 2022, but now anticipates only 3.2% growth. It forecasts growth of 4.7% through 2023. Except for the pandemic, this year is expected to see the lowest growth since the 1970s. The growth we anticipate for the upcoming year will still be far below what China has historically seen. Beyond the hardship and humanitarian disaster caused by Russia's invasion of Ukraine, slower development and higher prices are already having an impact on the entire world economy. There are 3 basic avenues through which impacts will move. One is that increased inflation due to increasing pricing for necessities like food and electricity will erode the purchasing power of incomes and reduce demand. 2. A historic increase in refugee movements will put a strain on nearby economies, which will have to deal with disrupted supply chains, remittances, and trade. Third, lower asset values will result from investor uncertainty and lowered company confidence, tightening financial conditions and perhaps causing capital outflows from emerging markets. Major producers of commodities, Russia and Ukraine, have seen their prices surge due to interruptions, particularly for natural gas and oil. Food prices have increased, with wheat prices reaching a milestone, with Ukraine and Russia accounting for 30% of global exports. The battle will hinder growth and drive up prices, delivering a serious blow to the world economy. Although trade between Russia and Ukraine and the African continent as a whole is negligible, several African nations largely rely on these two nations for vital imports, including wheat, fertilizer, and steel. African nations might suffer if these imports are interrupted. For instance, Kenya purchased about 30% of its wheat from Russia and Ukraine in 2021. This is a supply disruption that would have an impact on Kenyan bread production, the third most popular food item in the nation. In 2021, Cameroon purchased 44% of its fertilizers from Russia. Analysts worry that this disruption might have a disastrous influence on agricultural output and jeopardize food security in West Africa, where planting season has just begun. In a similar vein, 60% of Ghana's imports of steel and iron ore originate from Ukraine. Ghana's construction industry is projected to experience substantial difficulties as a result of the war. Countries with direct trade, tourist, and financial exposures will face additional pressures on top of global spillovers. Although some exporters, like those in the Middle East and Africa, may benefit from higher prices, economies that rely on oil imports would see greater fiscal and trade deficits and more inflation pressure. In some areas, including Sub-Saharan Africa, Latin America, the Caucasus, and Central Asia, steeper price increases for food and gasoline may lead to a larger risk of instability, while food security is likely to worsen in several areas of Africa and the Middle East, according to Economic Outlook and regional evaluations. Longer term, the war might radically change the world's economic and geopolitical structure if commerce in energy changes. Supply chains will be reconfigured, payment networks are disintegrated, and countries' reserve currency holdings are re-evaluated. Risks of economic fragmentation are further increased by rising geopolitical friction, particularly in trade and technology. Well, despite these concerns, Western nations have pledged more than $1.55 billion in funding, supplies, and training to strengthen Ukraine's military prowess in its conflict with Russia. The money, which was pledged by a group of 26 nations at a conference in Copenhagen, will be used to train Ukrainian soldiers, demine war-torn areas in Ukraine, enhance weapon manufacture for Ukraine, and supply existing weapons, missiles, and ammunition. According to Bodskov, the defense ministers of Poland, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic expressed a desire to increase the production of artillery systems, ammunition, and other military hardware for Ukraine. Britain later pledged an extra €300 million, including multiple launch rocket launches and precision-guided M31A1 missiles that can hit targets up to 50 miles away. Britain has already sent advanced weaponry to Ukraine and trained thousands of its soldiers in military skills. To stem the tide of Russia's invasion on February 24th, the leadership in Kyiv repeatedly pleaded with the West to deploy more weaponry, notably long-range artillery. And earlier this month, Ukraine claimed that Germany and the United States had delivered additional high-precision heavy weaponry to the country. The provision of longer-range weapons, according to Moscow, justifies Russia's ambitions to gain control over more Ukrainian territory for its defense. Moscow has accused the West of prolonging the conflict by arming Ukraine. However, a study published on Tuesday by the Kyiv School of Economics estimates that Ukraine has lost up to $600 billion as a result of Russia's invasion. In this, $92 billion is infrastructure damage, adding to President Volodymyr Zelensky's initial estimates that Ukraine has lost more than $500 billion since the war began. At least 195 factories and businesses, 230 healthcare institutions, and 940 educational facilities have been damaged, destroyed, or seized, according to the report, which is a part of the school's Russia Will Pay project that aims to document the costs of Russia's invasion. Infrastructural losses incurred by residential buildings and roadways were over $60 billion, with 14,788 miles of highways already damaged. The analysis concluded that losses to business assets in Ukraine came to approximately $10 billion. Alright guys, this wraps up our video for today. please do give us a thumbs up and don't forget to hit that subscribe button as well.